I'd like to first of all introduce Kathy McNeil. She's standing in the middle. Kathy is the reason you're here tonight, and the letters are the reason that you're here tonight. We would not have known about these letters without Kathy. She researched the Howe family. She discovered these letters that probably haven't been seen since 1934 in the annals of Iowa. And not only did she discover the letters and become entranced with them, but she wrote this production tonight. It's just amazing. I'm going to get teary here. So thank you for your applause for Kathy. It is very well deserved.
Well, when I started volunteering at the museum in 2022, I had no idea I'd be standing here tonight. It's not exactly my thing. But one day I had said to Mary, you know, we know a lot about Abby Gardner, but so little about the other victims. So I told her, I says, I'm going to start researching on Ancestry.com just to see what I can find out. Well, in the meantime, she introduced me to the book, A History of Dickinson County, Iowa by R.A. Smith. Well, that's where the rabbit hole started. I learned so much about the area that I didn't know. And R.A. Smith had said that there were 4 men in particular that really were the founders of Spirit Lake and Dickinson County. And he said they were Orlando Howe, Robert Wheelock, Benjamin Parmenter, and George Spencer, who also started Spencer in Clay County. Well, the thing that really stood out to me was the name Wheelock, because my grandmother's maiden name was Wheelock. So I kind of tucked that in the back of my head while I finished the rest of the book and thought, I need to do a little more research on that. So anyway, through Ancestry.com, I did discover that Robert Wheelock and his 2 sisters, which married Orlando Howe and Benjamin Parmenter, were all Wheelocks, and they are very distant cousins, but they are related no less. So that was exciting, and that's what really ended up pushing me in this direction. Just a little detour. I'll get back to the other victims, but right now I ended up doing this. And as I said, Howe, Parmenter, and Wheelock are all brothers-in-law, and married Robert's sisters Maria and Lavinia. And I also had no idea that I had any connections whatsoever, family connections to this area. I thought all my family was in Kossuth County and Story County. Anyway, tonight now I would like to introduce you to Orlando Cutter Howe and his wife, Maria Wheelock Howe. And we're just concentrating on these 2 people tonight partly because that's who I found the most information on. And I give total credit for this presentation to R.A. Smith's book, Ancestry.com, and the Annals of Iowa, where I discovered these letters. The Howes had kept, I think, just about all the letters that they wrote to each other through the years. And their daughters gave them to a professor from Drake University named F.I. Harriet. And he wrote then these articles in the Annals of Iowa that I happened to stumble across in my research. And let's see, the daughters did tell him that he could do whatever he wanted to with the letters. And fortunately, he donated them to the State Historical Society of Iowa. And Mary and I had the opportunity to go to Des Moines and actually hand hold those letters. That was pretty exciting. Anyway, just some General facts. Orlando was born in 1824 in Williamstown, Vermont. Maria was born in 1829 in Lancaster, New York. As a boy, Orlando's parents moved their family to the state of New York. Orlando and Maria married in 1849, and they lived in Alden, New York, which is up near Buffalo. He was an attorney and a teacher. Maria was also a teacher and taught at a girls' school. At this time, they had one child. Her name was Eveline, and they nicknamed her Lenny, and she was born in Alden, New York in 1853. Orlando first came to Iowa in the fall of 1855 by himself. So just think now about, 167 years ago, these letters were written. So think about, the travel, how long it would have taken to travel from place to place, and especially how long for these letters to arrive back and forth to each other. So now, let me introduce you to Orlando and Maria Howe.
December 17, 1855, Alden, New York. My dear husband, it seems a long 2 weeks since you went away, but I know spring will come by and by, and Linny is very impatient to see her new log house. James had a letter from home a few days ago. Catherine is very unwell, with a troublesome cough and a very low-spirited. She does not think she will ever be better, but I cannot think of such a probability. I suppose your next letter will give a description of your new home, if that can be home to you without wife and baby. I wish to bring with me in the spring, if I have money enough to pay transportation, 6 chairs and 1 rocking chair, 1 table, 1 stand, 1 bedstead. Oh, and if I could possibly get a cheap bureau to pack clothes in instead of box, it would cost but little more to bring. Oh, and be indescribably convenient. If I can sell the looking glass, I will. If not, maybe it could be sold after we get there, if we wished it. Lenny says she doesn't like the cow horses. They have such slow legs. In regard to bringing roots and shrubs, never fear but that I will bring all we can pay for. I wish I knew something about what it will cost to get there. What if I don't have money enough? What is to be done then? I hope I shall. And had supposed it certain, until in your last letter, you say it cost you 3 times what you expected. Did it cost you over $50 to go there? I don't think I shall have any more, perhaps not that. Write me all the particulars of places and people, of yourself and your employment, your board, mending, and everything in connection with your prospects, dark or bright as they may be. Have they any Sabbath where you are? And if so, how do they keep it? Or does the hurry and whirl of speculation and improvement confine thought to this life only and the things that perish with the using? When you think of home, my dear husband, is it sometimes with prayer that he in whose hand are the appointed times will bring us all together in health and love? Does the absence make your home so dear? Or does your heart wander with your footsteps? I trust not. I do not fear it. And I believe that when we meet, we will be better prepared to live lovingly, bearing and forbearing tenderly with one another, having learned how necessary we are to each other's happiness. Goodbye for the present. I must finish this for the post tonight. Take care of yourself, and do not worry about us at home. Write often and tell the particulars. your wife.
Wednesday, 9:30 p.m., December 1855, Dubuque, Iowa. My dear wife, here I am in Iowa at last. Have just arrived and not seen anything, for it is as dark as the Lancaster ride from Institute Night. A stirring city, this. I am at the Peasley House, cheap house comparatively, though nothing is cheap in this state. Do you know what IOWAH means in Indian? A book here tells me it is, I have found the happy land. The ride today, after getting a few miles from Chicago, is through a most beautiful and rich country. The houses look very few and scattered, but are of fine appearance. Some places appear like elegant country seats in the midst of the most fertile land. Everything whirls fast in this country. It most makes me dizzy. Railroads and railroad schemes are so thick that no one can keep track of them. 4 distinct routes are projected, and all commenced by one. That lead from the Mississippi to the Missouri. I made up my mind when leaving Buffalo and seeing the number of persons going to look up a home in Iowa or Minnesota that I would preempt as far as a farm as soon as I could get back 100 miles or so from the river and find plenty of timber. I do not believe that there are 20 lots in market in the state, especially the ones that have good timber on them. And in the extreme northwest counties, squatter claims cover every good location. They cover every good location of timber and can be bought for from $30 to $1,000 a claim of 320 acres. Pretty profitable squatting, that. The towns in the country that were just heard of last year have from 500 to 1,500 inhabitants. You may remember that I spoke of Fort Dodge on the Des Moines as a good site. It is some 180 miles west of here, and the railroad is going through it. Last winter, there was a fort there. Now, some 30 houses, and the old fort full of settlers, 2 stores, a blacksmith shop, government land office. I have received a good deal of information from a man living in Sandusky who has been looking up land on a large scale. Last May, they hired a surveyor and his team. They took a tent and provisions and started paying their surveyor $10 a day for him and his team. And they boarded both of them. They traveled through 20 counties in the middle and northern part of the state and bought over 20,000 acres of land, best of prairie, but did not find 40 acres of timber in the whole tract that they visited that was not bought or claimed. Their land is worth double what they paid for it, and within 2 years they can, I no doubt, sell most of it at that and a greater advance. I rode from Chicago with him, and he kept him busy talking. He is a fine man, plainly one of the first citizens, and gave me more useful information than I could have found by a month of travel. The immigration is beyond all precedent. The cars are full of men coming in on the spring. Don't be alarmed about my taking you into the woods to live. I am in doubt whether to find a school now and teach 1 quarter and get you here before looking for my location, or to look it up. Then go to some town in the spring, start a school for you and sisters, while I play gentleman and watch the claim. Without joking, I think I can make more money and easier within a year by settling either schools or law, but don't want to travel, and in the winter north, though there is but little snow at any time there. What I want is to be near by in spring. Now, Maria, I am mad. While eating breakfast, somebody stole my town. For on looking at the map for 1856, folks get early starts out this way, I find two cities at the South Bend, Mankato City and South Bend City, probably started by some entrepreneuring capitalist like myself. Perhaps not so rich in money as I am, but having a few spare quarters instead of halves, but having more energy. He worked while I dreamed and wished over the stove at night. Now, as soon as you read this rhapsody, or whatever you call it, just write me a letter directed West Union, Fayette County, Iowa. I shall remain near that place long enough to get a letter from you, perhaps 2 or 3. Kiss dear Lenny for me. Don't let her forget me. Read my letter to our folks. I think of you all the time, but have no regrets at leaving. I am full of hope. May our God protect thee and all ours. Orlando C. Howe.
December 23, 1855, Alden, New York. My husband, it is a Sunday afternoon and the snow so deep there is no going to church today. It lies in great drifts all around. I find upon a survey that any stationery is in a dilapidated condition, no paper, no pen, but will write today with such materials as are on hand, since I do not feel that greatest want of time. I received your letter yesterday, after waiting many anxious days in vain. It was a long time without a letter, almost 2 weeks. Things move on here, about as usual, dull very, and lonesome, but I do not wish you here. Oh, no, no, no. I feel that we have stayed here too long already. I am sure you will earn as much as you could here, for there is no law business at this winter. And if you had not gone in the fall, I do not think you would in the spring. Aside from the trial of leaving friends, I do not in the least shrink from the prospect of hardship. I know that although of a different kind, they cannot be worse than we have suffered here, of a kind more apparent to the stranger's eye, perhaps, but without the bitterness of the continually disappointed and hearts forever wearied by a necessary strife for food and clothing. Oh, no, I do not dread it. The prospect is full of joy. I am so tired of being where the necessity to do is so great and the ability so limited. I have no doubt that your preemption of a farm was the best thing you could do for the future, and the best for the present, probably. Although attended with many hardships, I cannot say that I fear them much, of a different kind from those we have endured, but not attended with such heartbreaking, courage-deadening hopelessness. I do not know what kind of a farmer you will make, nor what kind of a farmer's wife I will be. But we have long wanted to farm, to own as a dependence in sickness or hard times of any kind. I shall not certainly like living 4 miles from neighbors, and hope if you succeed in getting the adjoining farm, you will sell it to some good family man. Eveline is well, and grows fast. She does not improve much in morals or deportment, but physically is in excellent condition. Your mother pronounces her uncommonly good, rather mischievous sometimes, but very good. She has not forgotten you. I am coming the very next day after school is out. M.H.
January 10th, 1856, Newton, Iowa. My dear wife, I do not like to write so often without having anything to write respecting being in business. I have found no employment yet. I have been to several school districts, but either there is no schoolhouse or it is not warm enough this cold winter, and hardly anyone will work in this weather. I have worked southward to find it some warmer, but it is really colder than in Hardin County. I am in a fit of the blues almost today by imagining every possible evil as having befallen you or Lenny. A deputation from the caucus requested me to accept the nomination for judge, provided I was eligible. Unfortunately, I shall want 2 months of residence to make me eligible. This dissipated the blues, but on commencing writing to you, how plain I see your image. I am homesick, no mistake about it, and I should start tomorrow for Iowa Falls, 70 miles, to get a letter which I hope to find there from you. A strange state is Iowa. Employment is so easy to get, but still I can't get any. The simple fact is the cold weather has paralyzed everything. Nobody can work. Most of the mechanics refuse to work. Everybody is too independent to work in cold weather. And I have found but 2 buildings to work in. And I am as adverse as the rest to the outdoor work. All waiting for spring. That word spring, that is to bring my loved ones to me if some great evil does not befall us. Oh, but perhaps you've already written that my description of the hardships has so terrified you that you wish to wait. Oh, if so, I can understand it, I suppose. Don't know, though. Write to me at Jasper, Newton County, Iowa. Also to Iowa Falls, Hardin County. I may stay here longer enough to get a letter, as the prospect is fair for forming a class in elocution. May God protect all at home and bring our little family together again. Your husband, Orlando C. Howe.
January 12, 1856, Alden, New York. My dear husband, it is Sabbath afternoon, and such a depth of snow on the ground as I hope never to see again in New York. Your father came up on the pony this morning and had a hard time getting here. He says the snow is 2.5 feet everywhere. We had only 2 mails last week. One on Monday, the other yesterday. The wind has blown tremendously all the past week, and the thermometer stood 23 degrees below zero. I was alarmed upon reading that you were frostbitten, not so much from the fear of injury from those bites, but it made me think you were not careful about exposing yourself. And I fear some cold snowstorm will find you bewildered on the prairie, a terrible situation in which it would be very wrong to place yourself. I was glad to learn that you were settled, where you are so much pleased with the country and the people. I have no doubt I shall like them both, as well as Alden society or scenery. Better, I hope. Are there no houses between your farm and the village? How far to the next house? Or as you call them, huts. Where do you live, and with whom? What kind of creatures are they? Where did they come from? Where are the settlers principally from? Are they married generally or not? Are there any children there? And if so, do they learn to speak English? How do the people live and look? What do you have to eat, and what are you doing? And what are you going down the river for? I want to know all these things and dozens more. I am quite delighted with the thought of coming to you. Only that terrible distance from neighbors frightens me, no wonder. Where will you get the slabs to make the house? And how in the world can you make a hay roof? I think if we have 2 rooms plastered, we shall be very comfortable. I will bring paper to paper the walls, 1 room at least. And then we will have a fine yard around it, and the sides covered with vines. I don't like the thought of sodding it winters. I wish you would set the house up from the ground, if you can. Mr. Hendy says, Mr. Brewer says, building so near the ground is the first and only cause of sickness at the West. I think it would be like a cellar, damp and unhealthy. Well, perhaps not. I wish it was built and Lenny and I were in it. I dare not think of the long, long time before spring. The mind recoils from the prospect, but each day will come, I know, with its own cares and blessings, and be no harder than the previous ones. It is a very long time between your letters. I wish you would write oftener, if you can. I would have written without waiting, but did not know, but you had moved. Now I have put everything into this and have nothing left for the other letter. Linny does not forget her pa. M.H.
January 22 through 28, 1856, Newton, Iowa. My dear wife, no news from you, yet but I live in hope. Have you had an opportunity to send to Iowa Falls and Eldora? So if any letters are there, I shall get them in about 2 weeks. I have found work for the rest of the winter and might do very well here permanently. The difficulty here would be to get a place to live in. Such a house as the old shell you are in would rent here for $400 a year. I, yesterday, sent for half a section of land to be entered in time in Greene or Carroll County. This adds 320 acres to my landed interest. I owe for this last farm $560. If I should not be able to pay for it in 1 year, it will go back, and my note will be canceled, so that all the risk is the loss of $10 sent to begin with. I'll risk it. When I hear how many of our folks have been affected with Western mania by my rhapsodies, then I shall know what to do. If Henry and Bob or John and Father have concluded to come, we will make a rush. Tell Father that if immigration is as great next summer as it was last, he could come here with $500, spend the summer with us, and so invest it as to make it worth 4 or 5 times as much. Love to all. Goodbye. Kiss Lenny. Does she talk about me? Will she forget me? I know there's one at home who will not. O.C. Howe. April 1st, 1856, Newton, Iowa. Brother Lester, wife and daughter, if there. At last, I have word that Maria is to start the 7th of April, and I intended then to change my proposition that I wrote you. I go for her, but I cannot very well leave till about after the 18th, and perhaps not then. Besides, if Maria can afford the hardship of another journey alone, the expense to take me there and back is quite an item, not much less than $40, which at this time we shall need to commence housekeeping with. I have made no arrangements yet about a house, as I cannot tell when the furniture will come, but think we had better go to housekeeping without it rather than wait. I am sorry they were shipped to Burlington, as I wished they would go rather to Iowa City. I send $5 and will keep sending every mail till there is enough. If you can raise enough to start with, $20 here, do it. And if by borrowing, I will send that amount back. I shall not start till I hear from you that Maria is there. The route here is by railroad to Rock Island, then to Iowa City on the cars, and then by stage to Newton. Yours in haste, O.C. Howe.
Only presenting a few of the letters, you're just kind of getting a glimpse of what it would have been like at that time. When I read all of the letters, it just gave me a feeling that obtaining land was quite a deal. It was a very competitive thing, and that feeling of constant hustle and bustle, and Orlando had to be on the move all the time. The men had to stay informed and be the first one in line if they wanted to get the location that they wanted. One description told of outside of a land office, there were 300 men lined up, and they'd stood in the snow and the cold all night and, froze their feet. The land agent could only process about 4 or 5 men a day. So that meant these 300 men were literally going to be standing in line for 2 months. So they did come up with a numbering system. So they were given a certificate with a number on it, and that way they could go home and say the man with number 300, excuse me, knew that he would have about 2 months. He could be at home and then come back. Times were hard during these years. The economy was heading towards the financial collapse of 1857. Great numbers were immigrating from the east because of lack of work and lack of food. Maria and their daughter were still in New York, and Orlando worried about them, and Maria worried about Orlando. But yet, both were full of dreams and hope for their new life in Iowa. Maria and Lenny have finally arrived in Newton, Iowa. And shortly thereafter, Orlando's parents, Robert Wheelock, Benjamin Parmenter, and a friend, Cyrus Snyder, also arrived. So Orlando is now accompanied by his brother-in-laws, and they're still traveling around then looking for the perfect place. Orlando's goal had always been to start a county and a county seat. So now we're going to move into 1857. And this time he leaves his family in Newton, Iowa, and the letters continue.
February 24th to March 5th, 1857. Fort Des Moines, Boonesboro, and the settlement in Palo Alto County. My dear wife, we have at least reached the capital of Iowa after a quick passage of 4 days. We are well and in good spirits and will go on as fast as possible without incurring danger. There is going to be some strong efforts made by others to start a town in Spirit Lake, but we will get the start if possible. We heard yesterday from the settlement on the Des Moines River in Minnesota, 12 miles north of Spirit Lake. The weather there has been no worse than here, and there is plenty of hay and provisions and no Sioux, so do not let Indians trouble you at all. We are now within 2 days' journey of the lakes and begin to feel quite contented. It was so cold and windy, and Robert's eyes are sore, and Laura is some lame. So we waited here today in Palo Alto. When we will hear from you is uncertain, as the Des Moines will rise so high that it will be impassable until June or longer. Though I shall go down to Fort Dodge for letters by the 1st of April or soon after. How I wish to hear from you. The winter has been hard here for the settlers, though. I find none who are going to leave. The prospect is fair, and the accounts of the country encourage Parmenter and Snyder very much. You will have plenty of eggs here and at the lakes, for geese and ducks without number build their nests on the shores. Provisions of the game kind will all be plenty. I have no further light tonight. Goodbye again to both. Orlando C. Howe. March 22nd, 1857, Fort Dodge, Iowa. My dear wife, since you last heard from me, what strange events have taken place. But by the mercy of God, we are all spared though through many, many apparent dangers. After leaving here, we were much hindered and at least left our horses and went with the oxen to Dr. Bidwell's claim in Palo Alto County, about 25 or 30 miles from Spirit Lake. Here we waited for several days as the cattle were lame and we were nearly tired out, but at last started again. On the 16th, last Monday, we reached within 3 miles of the lakes with the teams, and they got fast in the snowdrifts. So we took a hand sled with a little provisions and bedding and went to Mr. Joel Howe's house, the same place where Robert and I stopped last fall. We remarked that no one appeared to be on the lookout and thought it strange. But a dog came out. He was barking at us. As we approached near, the house appeared deserted, and on the outside, there was much confusion. Things were being thrown out, scattered around. We looked into the house through the window and saw the bedding piled up on the floor. Robert and I then went on to Mr. Thatcher's to see if they were at home, thinking that actual starvation had driven away Howe's family. As we came to Thatcher's, we saw that things were in worse confusion there. The beds having been ripped open and feathers scattered out and cattle killed at the door, and saw moccasin tracks about. and suspected that the Indians had been at mischief. We did not break into the house, but went back to Howe's, where Parmenter and Snyder had remained. They had built a fire in the stove and told us they had seen a corpse in the house, and so they had come outdoors to wait for us. We did not like to stay in the house, but concluded it was necessary, so we went in and stayed all night, as it was too dark to travel. We expected to find the whole family dead in the house, either by starvation or violence, but concluded to make no examination till we left. When we ready to start, we found such a scene as I hoped never to see again. Mr. Howe's family had all been murdered, and probably by the Indians. We did not wait long to examine the bodies, but only saw a few. I recollect 7. There were probably more. One child younger than Lenny. We went back to the Des Moines River at the Irish colony as soon as possible, leaving all the load in the prairie by the lakes, except our clothing, arms, and some provisions to last us through. On reaching the settlement, we found that people had given us up for murdered as we had gone on and not been heard from, and several others had within a few weeks gone to the lakes, and only one, a Mr. Morris Markham, had escaped. He was there some 10 days previous to us and went to Mr. Gardner's house and found the people. They were all murdered, and then he went to Mr. Thatcher's and found it plundered, but Mrs. Thatcher and child missing. We found Thatcher at the settlements, nearly distracted at the loss of his family, and especially the uncertainty as to their fate. They may be prisoners, but I fear they are dead. From 12 to 20 of the bodies at the lakes have been seen by Markham and ourselves, but the other persons have not been heard from. There were about 40 in all. My dear wife, how I now wish to come to you for a short time, but I cannot. I am impelled by a sense of duty too strong to be resisted to assist in finding those missing persons. Robert, Schneider, and myself came here to raise a company and to look for them, and we shall start Tuesday with a very strong force. Parmenter waited at the colony for us to return with the company, as he could not walk fast enough for the emergency. Snyder has heard his child is sick and has today concluded to go back to Newton, but promises to come up again and perhaps will bring some help. Oh, how I have dreaded to write so much that will pain and alarm you, but I have no wish to conceal my intentions if I could. It may be some consolation to you that there is not much probability of our overtaking the Indians, though I think and hope you will rather wish we should succeed even at much danger. Had I not seen those murdered children and heard Thatcher's appeal for help to find his family, I might think it right to leave you and Lenny to go back. But God, in his providence, placed me there and has most mercifully and almost miraculously spared our lives. And you will agree with me that it would be wrong for me to leave this work to others. We intend to go to the lakes and pursue the Indians as far as any prospect of success appears, and then we rebuild a strong block house on our claim that will be a defense in the future for any aggressions. Of course, we do not think of ever taking our families into a place of danger, but this terrible massacre will probably be the occasion of driving the Sioux out of the country, and in a few years, if God so will it, we may be spared to think over his many mercies and praise his goodness in safety in that country now so gloomy. I hope to return to Newton in 2 months or less, and will have several opportunities of writing to you. Continue to write to Dakota and Fort Dodge. How I love those letters you sent me. Have a good courage. We will do our duty and leave the results with God, and you need not fear if the hour of trial comes that I will cause you or Lenny to be ashamed of me. Tell Lenny that I must go to drive away the Indians that killed the little children. Have not you and Lenny been wonderfully preserved from being there? Your husband, Orlando C. Howe. March 26, 1857, Fort Dodge, Iowa. My dear wife, we start today with a very strong force and shall have about 100 men in our army. This will make our efforts successful without doubt and will prevent all danger, or nearly so. Do not be unnecessarily alarmed. Write to Father's folks. I have written a short letter. We will try to get some work done this summer on our place, but unless a large settlement is formed, we'll not think of staying in the winter. Of course, you will not have the pleasure of seeing the most beautiful of countries for a long time, as I shall not ask you to go while there is possibility of danger, if at all. God protect you both. Orlando C. Howe. April 2nd, 1857, Spirit Lake, Iowa. The troops from Fort Ridgely have arrived 1 day in advance of us and driven away all the Indians, but not till they had destroyed another settlement. Part of our company returned today. The others stay to assist burying the dead. We are all well and will remain for some time, and I shall perhaps go to Sioux City before returning. I will try and write again in a few weeks. Goodbye, Orlando C. Howe.
So the first report of the massacre was given by Morris Markham, and for some reason, they didn't believe him. One of F.I. Harriot's ideas was he thought that Markham was kind of a maybe flighty, easily excitable young man, and that could have played into the reason why they didn't believe him. But then later, Howe, Parmenter, Wheelock, and Snyder, when they returned after the massacre, they went straight back to Emmetsburg first, Palo Alto County, and reported it there. Parmenter had suffered a lot through the traveling to and from the lakes area because of the weather. So he stayed in Palo Alto, and the others went on then to Fort Dodge and reported it there, so that they could get the troops together. And Howe, Wheelock, Parmenter, and Smith all joined the troops and were part of the troops then that went on to try and get the captives back and also to bury the dead. At some point, Howe, Snyder, and Wheelock were asked to write an official affidavit, And in 1932, F.I. Harriet said that he did locate the affidavit, and it was officially filed in the office of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C. And this is that affidavit.
The affidavit of Howe, Snyder, and Wheelock. On the evening of Monday, March 16, 1857, we, in company with B.F. Parmenter, arrived at the house of Joel Howe in the vicinity of Spirit Lakes, Dixon County, Iowa. We noticed that the house had apparently been broken into, and articles of furniture, books, etc., thrown out and scattered around. Two of us, Howe and Wheelock, then went to the house of Milton Thatcher, about 1.5 miles beyond, and found that in similar condition, and then first suspected the affair to be the work of the Indians. On returning to Mr. Howe's cabin, Schneider and Parmenter had noticed within the house a dead body. There was on the floor a quantity of clothing and bedding, and nearly covered by it lay a dead body. We had noticed moccasin tracks several days old around the house, and from some indications suspected that there were yet Indians in the groves. It being too dark to travel with only knowledge as to our direction, we remained till nearly light and then examined what we had supposed to be a heap of corpses. On removing the body exposed, we found others under it, thrown promiscuously together, some partly covered with bedclothes, others having bodies thrown upon them. And we did not count the bodies lying there, but from recollection as to the position they were lying in, and from recognizing several of the persons, can positively identify 7, although there were probably several more. We noticed on several of the bodies wounds that were apparently the causes of their death, but made no particular examination as to most of them. A gun barrel, which from our description has since been identified as belonging to one of the persons who were in the house, probably at the time of the murders, was lying upon the bodies. The stock had been broken off at the breach, and there were other signs of desperate resistance. Wheelock and Howe recognized several of the bodies as being those of some of Mr. Joel Howe's family. There was one child of less than 2 years old, and other children of the family. On reaching the West Fork of the Des Moines River, we found that an account of the affair at the lakes had reached the settlement there. We ascertained that for several weeks, persons had left the river for the lakes and were not heard from again, until Mr. Morris Markham had been there and returned about 10 days or 2 weeks previous to us. His statement, as repeated to us by others, were that he arrived at the house of Mr. Gardner at the lakes about sunset and saw the dead bodies of Mrs. Gardner and children and of Mrs. Luce and child. They were frozen, and from various appearances, he thought they were murdered 2 or 3 days previously. The corpse of Mrs. Luce was lying in the doorway and had been partly eaten by wolves. The others were lying out of doors, one child thrown upon a snowbank. Gardner's oxen were standing near the door, yoked to a sled, as though left by him a day or 2 before. Markham did not go into the house, but cautiously proceeded up the lakes to the house of Mr. Maddox. Here he came upon several lodges of Indians and was in the midst of them when he first saw them. He then worked his way out undiscovered and then went further on 3 or 4 miles to Mr. Joel Howe's. His description of the appearance of this house was just as we had found it, but he did not go in and saw no corpses. He then went to Mr. Thatcher's, where he had been boarding, and found matters on the outside as we did. He then went inside, found fire remaining on the hearth, but Thatcher's wife and child were missing. Then he left, camped in the prairie, by which his feet were frozen, and next day he reached the settlements. We found Mr. Thatcher on the river, he having seen Markham and heard of the captivity or destruction of his family while on his way home with provisions. Some of us are acquainted with Mr. Thatcher and regard him as a man of truth and not given to exaggeration, and we found his description correct wherever we went. From the best information we have, we are sure there were about 40 persons at the lake. From 12 to 20 have been seen dead. The others are probably either besieged, prisoners, or dead. Signed, Orlando C. Howe, Cyrus Snyder, Robert U. Wheelock.
So, Maria and Lenny did come to Spirit Lake in August of 1857, just 5 months after the massacre. Orlando had built the first home in what was then known as Spirit Lake City, and he built it near the fort, which was at that time where the St. Mary's Catholic Church now stands. Besides being elected the first county judge of Dickinson County in 1857, Orlando was later elected as district attorney. And at that time, the district was made up of 22 counties. I think there's one judge in the crowd that think traveling to 22 counties by horse or horse and wagon wouldn't be a lot of fun. In 1862, the Indians rose up again in Minnesota and another massacre happened. In 1895, Maria was asked to write out her memories of that event, and this is her memories.
Those who spend their summers at the pleasant resorts around Spirit Lake now seldom think what a comparatively short time it is since the warlike Sioux brought terror and destruction into that quiet neighborhood. During the spring of 1862, there was a feeling of unrest in northern Iowa. The small squad of soldiers kept there were at that time all away, but no one appeared much afraid. They returned in a few days and reported having been fired upon by Indians concealed in the tall grass and thick weeds that bordered the streams in that country. One morning in August, my husband rushed into the house, greatly excited, saying that a report had just reached town that the entire settlement at Springfield was murdered, and a party would start from the lakes in a few moments to learn the truth, and he was gone. I heard someone knocking and found at the door John Nelson, a Norwegian from Springfield, one little child about 2 years old in his arms, and holding by his hand a girl of 6 or 7. The baby kept up a continuous moaning, but was unconscious. "These all I got now. Wife and boys all killed by the Indians," said the poor man, as I took the bruised little one from his arms. He had walked 16 miles through the night, carrying one or both the children. My sister came in immediately, and we put the child into a warm bath. The heat revived it a little bit, but it soon went into spasms, and we discontinued it when it resumed that pitiful moaning. Mr. Nelson took the other little girl to a neighbor's and returned himself to Minnesota with the rescue party. All that day and most of the night, we cared for the little one, and in the early morning, death came. The soldiers were not there that night, and nearly the entire town were in the courthouse, a large brick building surrounded by a strong stockade. My sister remained with me and a young man, The son of Dr. Prescott remained with us, watching outside for Indians while we waited for the coming of death. It was a fearful night, husband and brothers all away, we knew not where, or whether they were then living or had been murdered. The next day some of the party came back, a part remaining to bury the dead. Men, women, and children scattered through the fields and groves, or lying in their homes killed and mutilated in every conceivable manner. Years after, my husband told me how, happening to look into the oven of a cook stove, they found a very young babe in a large dripping pan, prepared as a turkey to roast. We kept the Norwegian's child until the father returned, when it was laid away in a small grove on the shore of Lake Okoboji. Several of the neighbors who escaped the savages accompanied Nelson back to Spirit Lake. They were all at the burial, and after the grave was filled up, they knelt around it and sang, most mournfully, a funeral song in their own language. There were no depredations of any kind committed at Spirit Lake at the time of the fearful massacre at Fort Ulm. The vigilance of the settlers and the presence of the soldiers were doubtless what prevented it. Now, lovely residences adorn the groves and shores of Spirit Lake. Stately hotels offer ample accommodation to crowds of visitors, and the shriek of the locomotive is heard on all sides. The murderous Inkpaduta and his warriors are all creatures of the past, used only to give a weird touch of romance to the present. But few of the settlers remain in that vicinity. Most of them are resting in some silent city of the dead, and even the historical facts are fading from the memory of the living. Maria Wheelock Howe, 1895, Medicine Lodge, Kansas.
In 1863, Orlando joined the Civil War and chose to move his family back to Newton so that they would be close to family while he was gone. After he returned from the Civil War with health issues from exposure, dysentery, lack of food, hardships of war, they sold all property in Dickinson County and remained in Newton, where he practiced law and eventually became the Jasper County judge. They wrote letters again to each other during the Civil War years, and those letters can also be found in the Annals of Iowa. In these letters, they often mentioned their fond memories of their home at beautiful Spirit Lake, but because of the bad memories, they chose not to return. They went on to have 4 children. Eveline Lenny was born in 1853 in Alden, New York. John was born in 1858 in Spirit Lake, and he was considered the first official baby born in Dickinson County. Helen was born in 1860 in Spirit Lake, and Frank was born in 1868 in Newton. Eveline married late in life, in her late 50s, so she had no children. Not sure what has happened to John. I haven't been able to find enough records on Ancestry about him, but the last I heard about him was in Maria's obituary, and it did say that he was alive, but his whereabouts was unknown. Helen married and had 2 sons. Both those sons died young. And she married again and had 2 more sons. One of those sons died young. One son did go on to have a son. So as far as I know, there were only 4 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. Frank was born in Newton, I guess I said that, and he died young and never married. 1875 to 1880, Orlando taught at the University of Iowa in the law department. In 1885, they moved to Kansas to be near their daughters, and he again practiced law in Kansas. In 1892, Orlando came to Boone for Robert Wheelock's burial. And during that visit to Iowa, he did come up to Spirit Lake for the first and only time since they left the area in 1863. And there was even an article written in the Spirit Lake Beacon about his visit to the area. In 1895, he was asked by the Massacre Monument Committee if he would share his memories. And so he did write them up. He was physically unable to attend the dedication of the monument, so he wrote out his memories. It's quite long. We won't present it here tonight. We might be here till wee hours of the morning. But he hand wrote it. Mary and I got to see the his first drafts on handwritten paper. And it is published in the Annals of Iowa, so you can find it there also. And many more details of what they went through to and from the lakes area before and after the massacre and what they saw at the massacre site. Orlando and Maria's daughters had told F.I. Harriet that Orlando suffered nervousness through his life, and it got much worse as he aged. And it got to a point where his doctor recommended that he enter a sanitarium for a time of rest. And at one time, he and one of his attendants from the sanitarium were at a railroad station, and a bunch of Native Americans did come in to the railroad station in full, native dress, and it really set him off. He went into a wild fit of rage, and they did finally get him back to the sanitarium, and he died a few days later on August 23rd, 1899, at the age of 74. Maria died in 1909 at age 79, and they're both buried in Medicine Lodge, Kansas. F.I. Harriet had said of Orlando Cutter Howe that even though he remained at the lakes for only 6 years, in those few years his character, capacity, courage, and consideration for others won and held public confidence and left many vivid memories in the minds of the pioneers of our state's frontier, of a fine man and citizen, of an earnest, upright public official, and of a neighbor who would instantly put forth his utmost in behalf of family, friends, and fellows in a common cause or crisis. So that is our presentation. I definitely want to thank Marie and Clyde for being willing to do this and bringing them to life. And I also want to say that there is one name missing from this brochure that you received tonight, and that is of Mary Dreyer. I do thank Mary. Mary is the ultimate encourager. She gets behind you and she will tell you, you can do this. You're so good at this. I know you can do this. And she does it with all her volunteers and staff. So anyway, thank you so much, Marie, Clyde, and Mary.
She was talking about what has taken place at the museum and how it's grown and things like that. And it's because of her right there.
Hey,
Right
yes,
there. She has done
yes,
a phenomenal job.
Yes, yes, she has. And Mary has a few more words to say as well.
I just want to say thank you to Kathy, especially. The transformation that has undergone in Kathy's spirit over the last year has just been amazing, as she has shown the courage to do this. She's never done anything like this before, and she did it tonight, and she did it very well. And just an awesome job. I'd also like to thank the folks at the Pearson Lakes Arts Center for hosting us this evening. They've done an absolutely fabulous job of making sure those of us who are not tech savvy were able to shine. So thank you, Tyler. And Jeff Thee, we so appreciate your professional videotaping. Is that what you call it these days? Whatever. You've done it very professionally, and so you will be able, in a week or so, to be able to see this presentation again on YouTube and also on our museum website. Now, if you enjoyed these letters tonight, and I don't know if you can say enjoyment of the letters, but if you found them interesting and intriguing, we have a way for you to get to read even more letters, and it involves this book, White Men Follow After by Hattie Elston. Between the covers of this book are other letters discovered by F.I. Harriot, the same man who received the Howe letters and had them published and donated them to the State Historical Society. There are more letters, particularly from the family of Isaac Harriot, who was a veterinarian or medical doctor who was here pre-Howe's. And there are stories of his life here in the area within this book. Now, here's the good news, folks. Thanks to an anonymous, generous donor, our expenses for the evening have been covered. And I know that many of you came with the idea of making a donation to help us cover our expenses tonight. Well, we have another way for you to donate tonight because of our generous donor. And that is, we have this magnificent depot project going on. There is a container to take cash donations or checks in the hallway. Also, if you donate at least $50 tonight to the depot project, you'll receive a free copy of this book, which usually sells at the museum for $15. Also, if you would prefer to purchase a family membership to the museum and support all of the work of the Dickinson County Museum, you can purchase a family membership for $50 upstairs and receive a free copy of this book. We're great salesmen, aren't we? So thank you all for coming. Be sure to stop by the depot donation table and also the membership table so that you can take home a copy of this book and read on. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's been a marvelous night.